Right from the first episode of Sister Wives, Kody Brown introduced himself as a husband with a rather strange fantasy: 4 wives, one large family, and a life founded on faith and cohesion. But everyone has always asked, was this all about love? Or was it about domination? Behind the reality show dinners and scripted grins, there are rumblings of an evil alternative. An alternative where Kody doesn't just guide, he dominates. A side where all the moves he makes are according to a silent playbook aimed at keeping his wives under check and at safeguarding his own image. And here's the surprising thing: this playbook isn't on paper. It's in actions, manipulations, and maneuvers that viewers say they've seen over and over again. The tale of Kody's secret maneuvers is the tale TLC never quite depicts. The side fans reconstruct out of little cracks, hushed words, and tragic admissions to make them watch. If you've thought Kody's iciness on television is bad, just wait until you hear the secret rules that the fans think he's been employing to subtly rule the family in secret. Since the very first day Sister Wives premiered on TLC's airwaves, millions of television viewers were captivated by a daring promise: 1 man, 4 wives, one large family, attempting to make it all click under the spotlight. Kody Brown didn't simply introduce himself as a husband, he introduced himself as a visionary. A guy living a lifestyle most other people couldn't even dream of. He referred to it as love, faith, and family. To the cameras, it seemed like an experiment in harmony. To the world, it seemed like waiting to happen drama. But here's the juicy part that the fans can't help but gossip about: what we witnessed on screen was just half the story. The expertly edited family meals, the public professions of love, the grand family sit-downs, they created an appearance of openness. But behind those slick scenes, a more sinister story was playing out in the shadows. Fans started to notice fissures. They caught the wives' forced smiles, the abrupt endings of conversations, the unmistakable side glances that conveyed more than any line ever could. And they started to wonder, is this real Kody, or merely the persona he presents when cameras are rolling? On TV, Kody was charming, social, and even charismatic. He was the rambunctious leader, joking with the children, flaunting his golden locks, and attempting to sell America on the idea that polygamy was love and harmony, not competition and agony. He leaned into the character of the offbeat dad, who was miraculously holding everything together. That image succeeded in the first few seasons. TLC positioned him as a guy juggling impossible burdens: 4 wives, scores of kids, money woes, and the persecution of living in a society that did not approve of his lifestyle. It made him sympathetic. It made him likable. But eventually, the facade broke down. The charm appeared manufactured. The humor appeared cutting rather than witty. And what had once been quirky energy began to manifest as arrogance. Viewers started to catch on. Perhaps Kody wasn't the stressed-out family man he wanted everyone to think he was. Perhaps he was the one inventing the stress in the first place. Reality television is never totally real. Every viewer is aware of this. But on Sister Wives, the disparity between what was presented and what was suggested became impossible to ignore. Christine's distress was the first red flag. Her honest moments, when she said she felt abandoned, when she sobbed over her marriage, busted the myth of a harmonious plural home. People started wondering, if Christine is this unhappy on TV, how bad can it be off TV? Meri's loneliness painted another picture. She sat quietly in group scenes, often excluded from inside jokes or major decisions. Kody's body language toward her looked distant, even cold. How could this be the same man selling a vision of unity? Janelle's independence also shone through. Fans saw she wasn't as emotionally attached to Kody as the others, prioritizing her children and her career. But rather than embracing her strength, Kody was often angered by her independence. Robyn's ascendance became the last indicator. Since the day she arrived, fans could feel Kody's focus all but turn to her. What was sold as just love appeared, to most, like outright favoritism. The more fans witnessed, the more they were convinced. The happy-go-lucky, charismatic man on television was a facade. Behind the mask, another person existed. A dominating husband with a set of tactics to keep himself safe, regardless of the price to his family. The concept of Kody's mask isn't speculation. It's an accumulation of years of behavior. On camera, he portrays himself as the beleaguered father struggling for love. In plain language, though, the wives tell a different story. Christine defined neglect. Meri acknowledged her marriage was over years ago. Janelle revealed frustrations regarding finances and faithfulness. Fans began connecting these interviews, side glances, and raw admissions. And they discovered something daunting. The man Kody portrays on TV is perhaps nothing more than an act. Off camera, they think he plays by a secret playbook, wielding manipulation, silence, and favoritism to keep himself in power. That's why this mask seems so heartless. It's not about pretending, about lying to millions of people while his wives quietly suffer the consequences. In psychology, there is something known as dual identity, the public you versus the private you. For Kody, fans contend that this is taken to an extreme. Public Kody, boisterous, humorous, quirky, misunderstood but endearing. Private Kody, distant, controlling, dismissive, and affectionate in his choices. This double life is the reason that viewers are glued to their screens. They're not simply watching a family. They're attempting to discern which Kody is real. The worst part, the wives live more in the private one than the public one. TV. Viewers aren't passive anymore. The internet was filled with debates, speculations, and analyses of Kody's actions. Fans dissect episodes frame by frame, documenting every eyebrow raised, every snide comment, every prolonged silence. Online communities are dedicated solely to finding out the truth behind the facade. And through the years, one thread runs through these arguments. Kody is not the man he pretends to be. Rather than being the adhesive that keeps the family together, viewers contend he's the wedge that tears it apart. Rather than being a misunderstood dad, he's a manipulator guarding his ego. This fan-fueled narrative is powerful because it illustrates that the mask isn't working anymore. People are able to see through it. And once you are able to see through the mask, it's impossible to unsee it. Why spend all this energy on this mask? Because in reality, television perception is everything. If Kody manages to convince the world he's a good man just struggling with a messy life, then he wins sympathy, book deals, speaking gigs, and most importantly, narrative control. But when the mask slips, and fans believe he is manipulative, cold, and cruel, then suddenly everything changes. The wives gain more traction. His control falters. And the empire he's built begins to fall. That's why this mask is significant. It's not merely about image, it's about power. So now, after over a decade of Sister Wives, one haunting question resides in the minds of viewers worldwide. Which Kody is real? Is it the smiling, goofy father TLC made us familiar with? Or is it the cold, dominating husband that fans think lies behind closed doors? The truth may never be fully revealed. But one thing is certain, the cracks in the mask are widening. Christine's departure, Janelle's defiance, and Meri's isolation all suggest that the private Kody is breaking through the public act. And once the mask falls completely, fans believe the world will see the cruel playbook he's been hiding all along. The first and most ruthless stroke in Kody's supposed playbook is easy. Keep the wives apart. When Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn entered this family, the vision was togetherness. But togetherness is risky for someone who lives on control. If the wives were friends, they could call out Kody's judgments collectively. But if they were kept apart, suspicious, jealous, aloof, then Kody would always be the seat of power. Viewers observed that whenever Meri and Christine attempted to establish closeness, Kody tended to plant tension, sometimes favoritism, sometimes with veiled remarks. Janelle was frequently depicted as independent, which provided Kody with a pretext to downplay her contribution towards the family. And then there was Robyn, who viewers feel was set up as the favorite, creating competition rather than harmony. The cruel brilliance of this strategy is that it keeps the women focused on each other, instead of questioning Kody. By creating an atmosphere where everyone is competing for his attention, Kody never has to face collective pushback. But division is only the start, because once the wives are separated, Kody employs another tool, one much more hurtful: silence. So when you envision families, you think of cohesion, parents getting along, children supporting each other, and love being what keeps it all together. That's what most people wish for. But for Sister Wives fans, they imagine that Kody Brown turned that dream on its head. Rather than cultivating unity, he purportedly established his authority on something much more devastating: division. And not inadvertent division, thought-out intentional division that provided him with complete control. This play, which fans now refer to as Kody's divide and conquer tactic, could be one of the most ruinous plays in his secret playbook. Because when a family is split apart, they cannot revolt en masse. And when they can't all rise up at once, one man, Kody, is still firmly in command. In a plural marriage, cohesion among the wives is lethal for a husband who feeds on control. If Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn ever stood together, they could insist on fairness, compel equal treatment, and protest favoritism. That solidarity would challenge Kody's leadership in ways he couldn't dismiss. But if the same wives are separated from each other, jealous, suspicious, insecure, then they're too distracted by competing with one another to notice the larger problem: Kody's behavior. That's the nasty brilliance of division. It doesn't only destroy relationships, it blinds individuals to the actual cause of their hurt. Fans believe that Kody did not merely fall into this dynamic. Instead, he leaned into it, unwillingly or not, because it benefited him. Early on, fans saw tension between Meri, the original wife, and Christine, the third. Meri had the prestige of being the original partner, but Christine entered with a bubbly attitude, eager to show the world what she was worth. Over the years, it became clear that Kody played a role in keeping that tension alive. When Christine voiced her unhappiness, Kody often compared her efforts unfavorably to Meri's history. When Meri felt insecure, Kody would highlight Christine's role as a mother. By pointing out differences instead of celebrating common ground, he ensured that both women struggled to find solidarity. The bitter consequence: rather than blaming Kody for the imbalance, they tended to blame each other. Janelle has always stood out in the family. No nonsense, independent, and career-oriented, she frequently clashed with the more emotional dynamics of Meri and Christine. To fans, that independence should have been a source of pride, but rather it provided a pretext for Kody to drive her further onto the periphery. By positioning Janelle as different from the rest, Kody validated that she wasn't on the same emotional team. He relied on her financially, honored her work ethic, but less often gave her the same intimate closeness. This division formed another chasm: Janelle alone, attempting to maintain her ground, but by herself nonetheless. Once again, rather than looking at Kody as the middle ground, the wives were trained to look at one another as the issue. And then Robyn joined the mix. Ever since she walked in on the family, the fans could see the change in energy with Kody. He wasn't merely cuddly with her, he was brazenly enamored. Whereas the other wives were begging for his attention, Robyn appeared to get it freely. While Meri, Christine, and Janelle made sacrifices for years, Robyn was lavished with gifts, attention, and accolades. This favoritism wasn't subtle. Supporters contend that it was the very fuel that ignited the fire of divide. Suddenly, the other wives weren't just pitted against one another. They were pitted against a favorite. The most heartless part: rather than speak out about the favoritism, Kody used it to his benefit more often than not. If Christine complained, she was characterized as jealous. If Meri resisted, she was labeled bitter. If Janelle challenged the equilibrium, she was blamed for not being devoted enough. By defending Robyn so aggressively, Kody made the rifts deeper so the wives would never be able to turn against him. Meaningful family gatherings were what these were intended to be. Everyone sitting down to discuss, fix issues, and proceed. But the fans recognized a chilling trend: these sessions frequently turned into platforms where Kody pushed wedges even further. Rather than hearing out both sides, Kody appeared to shine a spotlight on one wife's grievance, and then used it to call out another's shortcoming. If Christine complained of neglect, Kody brought up Janelle's autonomy. If Meri complained, he turned to Robyn's allegiance. It wasn't about resolving anything. It was about reinforcing divisions. Eventually, the wives no longer trusted family meetings as sanctuaries. They were arenas where Kody held authority by keeping everyone step behind each other. Division doesn't just cause tension, it causes despair. Christine felt like she was a failure for never being quite enough. Meri drowned in isolation, thinking she had no protector. Janelle buried herself in self-reliance, but conceded she felt isolated. Robyn, knowingly or unknowingly, became the face of favoritism, isolating her from the rest of them while cementing her fate even further with Kody's. The psychological scarring of this estrangement can be seen in every tearful interview, every forced smile, every silence that says more than words. Quote says this: fans do not believe that this estrangement was unintentional. They think it was Kody's plan all along. By separating his wives, he guaranteed loyalty by means of competition. By fostering rivalries, he ensured that his dominance remained unchallenged. And by elevating Robyn as the favorite, he ensured at least one unconditional ally, even if that meant at the expense of the others. That's why people refer to it as cruel. It's not merely playing favorites, it's using division as a tool to hold on to power. But here's the catch. Division only works until individuals notice what's going on. Christine noticed first. She spoke out against the favoritism. She called out the neglect, and then she walked away. Leaving wasn't simply an individual decision, it was turning one's back on the divide and conquer game. Janelle responded with defiance of her own. Fed up being placed on the sidelines, she refused loyalty tests to determine her value. Even Meri, as much emotionally bound, started publicly addressing her anguish, revealing the fissures in Kody's control. The playbook had been in operation for years, but now it is falling apart. Even as the wives enter into independence, divisional scars remain. The dynamic between them can never completely heal from the years of veiled manipulation. The trust that might have been established instead was disempowered by suspicion. And the family harmony that was once marketed as a dream has been irreparably broken. That's why viewers think Divide and Conquer is the most diabolical play in Kody's playbook. It didn't only damage marriages, it dismantled the very glue of what this family was meant to be. And now fans are left with one searing question. Was Kody ever interested in being united, or was division always the intention? Because if division was the objective, then all that we witnessed, the dinners, the smiles, the family discussions, had nothing to do with love. It had to do with control. And when you realize that, the whole narrative of Sister Wives appears very different. When disagreements come up, the majority of husbands sit down and discuss it. But fans maintain that Kody does something far worse. He becomes cold. Emotional withdrawal is more than not speaking. It's about not showing affection, withholding your presence, and punishing through distance. Meri has endured this for years. Her efforts to reconnect, to therapy, gift-giving, or sit-down conversations, are usually greeted by icy dismissals. Christine also explained how the absence of emotional intimacy destroyed her spirit years before she departed. Even Janelle, who boasted a sense of independence, allowed that the silence stung more than she anticipated. In Kody's playbook, silence is effective because it causes desperation. The wives are left thinking, what have I done wrong? How do I repair this? How do I get him back? Rather than asking why Kody won't communicate, they blame themselves. It's a cold-hearted psychological tactic that gives him control without him having to yell. But when silence isn't enough, Kody flips the script in a way that leaves fans stunned. He plays the victim. When people talk about relationships, they often focus on the loud fights, the yelling, the arguments, the slammed doors. But sometimes the most damaging weapon isn't loud at all. It's quiet, it's cold, it's the silence that seeps into the walls of a marriage and leaves one person feeling invisible. For the wives of Kody Brown, enthusiasts believe that silence wasn't simply a casualty of discord, it was a strategy, a tactic Kody supposedly used repeatedly to keep control. Rather than yelling, rather than apologizing, rather than even attempting to mend the fissures, he just pulled back. He became cold. He withheld his love, his attention, and sometimes even his presence. And this retreat, in the opinion of viewers, was one of Kody's nastiest plays from his secret playbook. That anyone in a relationship understands that arguing, as unpleasant as it is, at least clarifies something. When you fight, you can hear the other person's emotions. You can hear their anger, their desires, their grievances, But silence is only confusion. It gets you questioning yourself. It gets you wondering, did I do something wrong? Am I not sufficient? Why won't they even glance my way? For Christine, Meri, and even Janelle, this became the most heartbreaking aspect of life with Kody. It wasn't just what he said, what he refused to say. It was the lack of warmth, the lack of reassurance, the lack of the simplest human validation. Silence doesn't only shut down conversations, silence destroys self-esteem. And that's just what the fans think they witness repeatedly in Sister Wives. No one was more hit with the chill of Kody's pulling away than Meri. As the original wife, she used to occupy a special position within the family. But as the years went by, her relationship with Kody disintegrated before the eyes of the world. What began as distance turned into detachment, and what turned into detachment soon became flat-out rejection. Fans will never be able to erase from their minds the times when Kody publicly confessed that he no longer felt married to Meri in any sense of the word. He even stated that he had no interest in having a relationship with her. But the most hurtful moment wasn't those words. It was the silence preceding them. Years of cold shoulders. Years of sitting across from him at family dinners, seeing him lavish attention on Robyn, and barely even look in her direction. Meri attempted it. She attended therapy sessions. She requested time alone with Kody. She even publicly owned up to her errors, such as the emotional catfish debacle. But no matter what she did, Kody's reaction was always the same. Distance. He shut her out until all she had was isolation. For the fans, this was the most obvious example of emotional withdrawal as ammunition. Rather than work at the marriage, rather than deal with her hurt, Kody just closed her out, and in doing so, he kept himself in charge. Christine quote stale is just as sad. On the surface, she was always the bubbly, cheerful wife who kept the family in good humor. But beneath that smile was an open wound. Years of feeling unwanted by the very husband she wedded. Christine confessed blatantly that intimacy had vanished from her relationship with Kody years before she decided to exit. She explained how he ceased to hold her hand, ceased to look for her, ceased to regard her as a partner. And when she pleaded for change, she was given cold denial. One of the most painful moments that fans recall is when Christine expressed her feelings of abandonment, only to have Kody basically affirm that he was no longer interested in her. But again, it wasn't necessarily the harshest word that stung, it was the long stretch of silence leading up to it. The years of attempting to rebuild and being met with nothing. The occasions when she got dressed up, prepared meals, or attempted to be loving, only to have Kody retreat further. At some point, Christine came to understand that the silence was not distance but a choice. And that realization empowered her to exit. Janelle also typically found herself presenting as the practical, no-nonsense wife, less emotional and more career and money-focused. But even she wasn't immune to the agony of emotional withdrawal. Janelle confessed that although she and Kody had a working relationship, it was missing emotional intimacy. They didn't fight as frequently as Meri and Christine, but they also didn't bond with each other. And when they did fight, particularly over loyalty, money, or parenting, Kody's response tended to be to withdraw instead of confront. For as independent a person as Janelle was, this may have been workable at first. But as time passed, the lack of partnership took its toll. She knew that being independent didn't equal being happy, and that Kody's retreat left her shouldering the emotional load alone. Here quote, ceased the ruthless genius of weaponizing silence. It reverses the onus. Rather than Kody being the one to remedy the situation, the wives are left scrambling to determine what they did wrong. They pursue his attention. They question their own value. They struggle harder for crumbs of love. And all the while Kody holds the reins without even lifting his hands. He doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to fight. All he needs to do is withhold. That's why viewers think emotional withdrawal is the sneakiest aspect of his playbook. It's hidden but it's heartbreaking. What makes this move hurt even more is the disparity between public and private Kody. On TV he was still able to flash a smile, make a joke, or behave like the mischievous father. But off TV, or in the moments TLC didn't cut away, spectators saw glimmers of the hardness. For instance, in group settings, Fans observed how he would sit beside Robyn, hardly ever beside Meri or Christine. When having serious talks, his body language yelled distance, crossed arms, sidelong glances, dismissive tone. These weren't loud fights. These were quiet, but they spoke volumes. This duality, the charm mask versus reality of quietness, is what led fans to believe Kody's playbook was purposeful. It wasn't mere neglect. It was strategy. The effects of emotional withdrawal linger much longer than the initial silence. For the wives, it eroded their self-worth. Christine said she no longer knew who she was by the time she left. Meri admitted she remained in a marriage that no longer existed because she couldn't release the expectation that silence would ever break. Janelle, who was so much stronger on the outside, cracked when she finally conceded she no longer felt absolutely married. Silence isn't just painful in the moment, it rewires individuals' perceptions of themselves. It leads them to believe they're not worthy of love. And to fans, that's what makes this strategy so heartless. Amongst everyday relationships, individuals occasionally withdraw because they're strained, exhausted, or unsure. But fans say that in Kody's situation, the trend was too regular to have been coincidental. Whenever a wife resisted, whenever there was conflict, his reaction was always the same. Pull back, withdraw, freeze them out until they acquiesced or gave up. And so fans do not view it as passive neglect. They view it as an active tool of control, an intentional play in the overall control playbook. But here is the catch that turns everything around. Silence only continues to work if the other party remains silent as well. Christine broke the silence when she spoke up and ultimately departed. Janelle started shattering it by speaking her frustration out loud. Even Meri, after all these years of clinging, finally confessed publicly that she no longer had an actual marriage. The silence that once accorded Kody power is now the same thing revealing him. Because the wives, once so desperate for attention from him, are finding empowerment in giving their voices to the truth. And now fans are left to wonder, was Kody's silence ever about reflection, or was it always about control? Because if it was all about control, then the cold shoulders, the withholding of intimacy, the refusal to interact, weren't just evidences of a failed marriage. They were strategic maneuvers in an evil playbook. And once you know to look at it that way, then the silence is louder than anything words could ever be. Here's where Kody's alleged playbook gets manipulative on another level. Instead of taking responsibility, Kody often repositions himself as the one who's been wronged. We've all seen the pattern. A wife speaks up about neglect or unfair treatment, and suddenly Kody is the one under attack. Christine pleaded for more closeness. Kody said she was disrespecting him. Janelle inquired about money decisions. Kody said she was being disloyal. Meri spoke up about how lonely she was. Kody portrayed it as her not displaying commitment. By positioning himself as the victim, he not only escapes responsibility but also reverses the emotional onus again onto the women. Fans recognize this as one of the most heartless plays in the playbook because it leaves the wives questioning their own hearts. They're not only damaged, they're also complicit, believing that they've somehow damaged him. It's a cycle that makes escape almost impossible, until someone like Christine finally has the strength to break it. Manipulation never ends at emotion. Kody's authority reaches deep into the family's very core, money and allegiance. If silence was Kody Brown's subtle arsenal, then playing the victim card was his over-the-top show. Through the years, Sister Wives viewers have observed a pattern so reliable, it must have been written in whenever the attention shined on his shortcomings. Kody flipped the script in an instant. Suddenly he wasn't the authority figure, he was on the defensive. He was not the problem. He was the wretched, misunderstood husband, oppressed by wives who didn't fully value him. This strategy, portraying himself as the victim, became one of the most jaw-dropping and manipulative plays in his secret playbook. And although it might have won some of them over at the time, to many fans, it showed just how far Kody would go to defend his reputation. At first glance, victim playing seems harmless. After all, don't we all feel misconstrued sometimes? Don't we all get caught up sometimes in self-pity when things get tough? But in Kody's situation, fans contend, this wasn't an accident, it was a tactic. Each time there was conflict in the Brown household, rather than taking ownership of his behavior, Kody framed himself as the victim. When Meri complained about pain over their failing marriage, He accused her of having betrayed him through the catfishing scandal. When Christine complained that she felt unloved, he claimed she had rejected his advances. When Janelle confronted his control, he framed her as disloyal. The outcome? Kody changed the story. Rather than being perceived as the attacker, he framed himself as the giver who was constantly giving but never appreciated. No one bore the brunt of Kody's victim act like Meri. Following the catfishing scandal, already one of the most humbling and vulnerable experiences of her life, Kody used the excuse to further distance himself from her. Instead of recognizing the loneliness and abandonment that pushed Meri into an emotional internet relationship, Kody employed her error as a do-or-die reason for not being intimate. And when Meri attempted to mend the wounds, Kody became the victim. He informed the cameras that he couldn't trust her anymore, depicting himself as the wronged husband who had to pull out. But fans noticed the fissures. They noticed how Kody didn't talk about the years of neglect Meri endured before the scandal. He didn't talk about the role his coldness played in her vulnerability. Instead, he framed himself as the wounded party, while Meri became the scapegoat. Christine Sis' decision to leave Kody in season 17 shocked viewers. But what shocked them even more was Kody's reaction. Rather than wondering why he felt so unloved by Christine, he blamed her for being unjust. Kody accused Christine of never respecting him, of turning the kids against him, and of giving up too easily. According to his account, he wasn't the husband who tuned her out, insulted her, and admitted he wasn't attracted to her. No, he was the husband who was trying, who gave his all but got cruelly dumped. The fans recall when Christine finally said she was done. Instead of listening, instead of being responsible, Kody blew his top, asserting that he was the victim of betrayal. He accused Christine of tearing the family apart, yet it was his years of pulling back that forced her to her limit. In asserting victimhood, Kody placed the blame once again on Christine. She wasn't merely leaving him, she was destroying the family. And to viewers, this was a familiar play from his playbook. Manipulate the story so he emerges as the victimized one. With Janelle, the victim strategy worked differently. Janelle, who prided herself on her independence and calmness, usually held firm in confrontations with Kody. But when she opposed his choices, particularly about money or family priorities, Kody presented her opposition as betrayal. He presented himself as the husband bearing the burden of a large family, only to be belittled by a wife who didn't support him. Rather than take her up on her issues, he said he was the one being disrespected. Again, he was the poor, misunderstood man trying his best, and everyone else let him down. For Janelle, this was draining. Rather than feeling like she had a partner, she felt like she was perpetually being tested for loyalty and punished when she didn't cooperate. The one wife who seemed to seldom experience Kody's victim blame game was Robyn. Instead, she tended to become a prop in the show. Viewers pointed out that when Kody fell into self-pity, Robyn tended to be the one nodding, agreeing, affirming his story. This dynamic created a bitter contrast for the other wives. While they were villainized in Kody's victim narrative, Robyn was villainized as the sole supporter who got him. This not only intensified the rift between the wives, but also legitimized Kody's victim behavior to those on the outside. If Robyn consented, then perhaps Kody actually was misunderstood. The strength of playing the victim is emotional manipulation. When they pose as the victim, it evokes sympathy. It induces others to refrain from challenging them. Because who is going to jump on the guy who's already down? For Kody, this strategy served on several fronts. With the wives, it made them doubt their grievances. With the kids, it made them feel guilty for resisting him. With the public, it engendered just enough uncertainty to mellow the criticism. But eventually, the fans caught on. They spotted the trend. And when the trend became obvious, Kody's victimhood began to resemble performance rather than pain. The harm of this strategy cannot be underestimated. By repeatedly reversing the narrative, Kody ensnared his wives in guilt trips. Meri internalized blame, holding on to a marriage where she was perpetually the problem. Christine bore the stigma of being called disloyal, even when she was struggling to defend her children. Janelle, tired of being reminded that she never supported him enough. For all of them, Kody's victim act made it more difficult to speak their truth, because every time they did, they got villainized. The irony of Kody's victim act is that it might have been effective within the family for years, but it blew up in his face with fans. Fans of Sister Wives are some of the most perceptive viewers on reality television. They catch the little things, the patterns, the contradictions, and they pushed back hard. Social media was abuzz with criticism of Kody's self-pity. Memes, tweets, and posts accused him of crocodile tears, of blaming the wives while never accepting his part. Fans weren't falling for the act anymore. They were naming it what it was: manipulation. In the light of his other strategies, silence, favoritism, financial control, the victim act is even more apparent. It wasn't about deflecting blame, it was about remaining on top. By positioning himself as the victim, Kody guaranteed that each confrontation resulted in his victory. The wives departed with shame, and he departed with authority. And that, according to fans, is why being the victim is one of the most lethal weapons on his arsenal. But here is where the narrative suddenly turns into a dramatic plot. In the first few seasons of Sister Wives, Kody's victim story didn't get much pushback. But as the months went by, the wives spoke out. They started calling his actions what they were. Christine broke the illusion first, refusing to be defined by his victim's behavior. Janelle spoke up next, asking questions about his incessant demands for loyalty. Even Meri, the longtime scapegoat, found her voice later on. The longer the wives talked, the less believable Kody's act was. And once divided, fans were now solidly with the ladies. Fans have also always wondered whether finances are another weapon in Kody's secret playbook. As the wives labored, invested, and sacrificed, Kody seemed to concentrate decision-making, particularly when it involved constructing homes, purchasing land, and making large family purchases. The infamous Coyote Pass property is a perfect example. Instead of clear agreements, the land became a web of confusion, leaving wives like Janelle frustrated and Christine disillusioned. Meanwhile, Robyn's home appeared to be a priority, reinforcing the idea that favoritism was guiding financial choices. Add to this Kody's ongoing loyalty tests. Disagreements are frequently couched as betrayals, commands for absolute obedience in order to demonstrate devotion. Wives who disagree are branded disloyal, with Robyn, who is more inclined to agree, being held up as the most devoted. Fans are convinced that these tests aren't about love, they're about control. And on to the greatest reveal in the playbook: the endgame. Because all these actions, division, silence, victimhood, and financial control, appear to lead to one final destination. Every control story has an end date. Every plan, no matter how well hatched, eventually breaks under its own pressure. And for Kody Brown, that fracture wasn't one blow-up argument. It wasn't one argument, one betrayal, or one scandal. It was years of silence, special treatment, blame, and manipulation mounting one upon the other, until the tower eventually came crashing down. The Brown family's breaking point wasn't dramatic. It was gradual, like a slow-moving fuse burning quietly in the night. But when the spark finally ignited the powder, the explosion rocked the very foundation of Sister Wives. Viewers sat in shock, as Kody's then giant family came apart before their eyes. And the mean-spirited playbook he believed would keep him in power, it became the reason he lost it all. The seeds of the breaking point were sown long before the cameras ever started rolling. Each wife had private wounds. Meri, starved of love and scapegoated constantly. Christine, belittled and neglected until the joy was sucked out of her. Janelle, used like a business partner, rather than as a wife. Even Robyn, favored though she was, carried the weight of being the only one still fully in his corner. For years they suppressed those hurts in the name of family cohesion. They posed for photos, went to family functions, and attempted to make plural marriage a success. Neglect has a tendency to accumulate like bricks. However, brick by brick, they constructed a wall that stood so tall it cut off any possibility of repair. The actual tinder was provided by Christine. For years she suffered quietly. She was the peacemaker, the happy homemaker, the good wife. But beneath that smile there was a woman becoming increasingly invisible. When Kody confessed he no longer found her attractive, something inside Christine changed. That was not rejection. though it was freedom. Christine knew that if she remained, she would be opting for a life of silence, abandonment, and starvation of the soul. And she couldn't have done that. Her choice to exit was unprecedented. She wasn't simply the first wife to leave. She left boldly on television, with her head held high. She dispelled the fantasy that Kody's playbook could hold forever. And viewers applauded, declaring her departure one of the most liberating moments in reality television history. But for Kody, Christine's leaving wasn't merely a breakup. It was the loss of control. After leaving Christine, Janelle stood at a crossroads. She had always been self-sufficient, but now the fissures in her marriage to Kody could no longer be ignored. Financial pressures grew, with Kody insisting on loyalty tests and investments in land, and Janelle focusing on independence and the needs of her children. The more she fought, the more Kody cast himself as the victim. But Janelle wasn't Christine, and she wasn't Meri. She didn't plead for his love, and she didn't accept his version. Her limit was reached when loyalty meant more to Kody than love. Janelle realized that her marriage had become a contract of obedience, not a partnership. And like Christine, she walked away, proving that Kody's control could not withstand a wife who valued her dignity more than his approval. Meri quote, "Breaking point was the quietest of all. After decades of clinging to the hope that things might change, she finally admitted to herself and to the world that her marriage was over." Unlike Christine and Janelle, Meri didn't storm off. She didn't give ultimatums. She just quit fighting for something that had died. For viewers, this was heartbreaking yet powerful. Meri, the wife most publicly rejected, finally escaped the cage of hope. Her goodbye wasn't loud, but it was final. And in many ways it was the most devastating blow to Kody, because without Meri's loyalty, without Christine's joy, and without Janelle's practicality, the family's foundation crumbled. That left only Robyn, the wife Kody had always favored. But here's the cruel irony. Favoritism that once kept Kody in control, now left him isolated. With Christine out of the way, Janelle checked out, and Meri walked away, leaving Robyn the sole survivor. And though she may have won Kody's attention, she lost the family harmony she had once professed to value. Viewers had witnessed the isolation in her eyes, the burden of being the last one standing. Kody's favoritism had paid off in the short run, but ultimately it failed him. It left him with only one wife in a plural marriage that was meant to be based on equality. When you lay out the pieces, the silence, the victim playing, the control, it's easy to see why Kody believed his playbook worked. For years it did. His wives remained, his children complied, and his family expanded. But control through manipulation is not sustainable. Ultimately, people catch on. Ultimately, silence gets too heavy, favoritism too blatant, and blame too draining. The breaking point was unavoidable because the system had been flawed from the beginning. Kody's strategy didn't create love. It created resentment. And resentment, once it hits a breaking point, can't be stopped. One of the most undervalued but potent components of the breaking point was the children. As they matured, they started speaking out against their father's behavior towards their mothers. Some affirmed Christine's decision to leave. Others openly spoke against Kody's favoritism. The kids then became living evidence that the playbook wasn't only hurting the wives, it was hurting the future. And when the kids began speaking their truth, the fantasy of Kody as the misunderstood patriarch broke even more. What makes this breaking point so significant is that it didn't occur behind closed doors. Millions of viewers saw it play out in real time. They witnessed Christine saying goodbye to her belongings, Janelle accusing Kody, Meri slowly disappearing, and Robyn being left in tears. The viewers were integrated into the narrative, applauding the wives, condemning Kody, and dissecting each action. The show that once idolized plural marriage as a heroic decision turned into a case study of how dangerous control and favoritism are. For Kody, his public breakdown was the ultimate shame. His playbook wasn't merely revealed, it was televised for the world to witness. The real breaking point wasn't merely the loss of 3 wives. It was the loss of his reputation. For years, Kody boasted that he was the patriarch of a diverse, loving, spiritually based family. But now the cracks are indelible. The man who boasted of being the protector of many is now the husband of one. His playbook did not shield him, it undermined him. And with the fans continuing to analyze every move, the verdict appears to be certain. Kody's tactics might have worked behind closed doors. But on the stage of reality TV, they demolished the very family he wished to manipulate. So we are left with this chilling question. Did Kody lose his family due to bad luck, or due to the very strategies he believed would keep them together? Because when you peel it all away, the silence, the favoritism, the victimhood and the control didn't save his marriage, they poisoned it. And the breaking point wasn't merely the dissolution of a relationship. It was the destruction of an entire empire founded upon manipulation. Ultimately, devoted fans think that Kody's ruthless playbook has always been pointing to the same place, defending Robyn and getting his legacy. Since the day Robyn joined the family, she was the focal point. Kody's attention, affection and devotion seemed to turn in her direction, and the other wives were fighting for crumbs of emotional attention. Christine saw that and walked away. Janelle senses that and is pushing back. Meri knows that and still struggles with heartache. In many fans' eyes, it appears Kody never cared about juggling his marriages. Rather, he used the other wives to create the family facade, privately making sure Robyn was the partner he valued above them all. But here's the catch. Fans are no longer blind. Christine's departure revealed the cracks. Janelle's rebellion indicates that silence will not hold permanently. And even Meri, though loyal, has publicly confessed she no longer has a true marriage. This has left viewers pondering one question. Has Kody's playbook finally been defeated? Because if the wives have figured out the tactics, then for the first time, the man who believed he dictated the narrative might be compelled to confront reality on camera. And that reality might bring down the empire he struggled so hard to preserve. When the storm passes, the silence that remains tastes different. It isn't the silence of neglect or deception. It's the silence of repercussions. For Kody Brown, the consequences of his playbook unfolding is a reality he never anticipated. Broken relationships, bruised trust, and a reputation that will haunt him for years to come. Viewers of Sister Wives now see Kody no longer as the charming patriarch who was able to persuade the world that plural marriage could work, but as the cautionary example of how control masquerading as leadership can destroy everything. And as the family struggles through life after the breaking point, the million-dollar question is what's left of the empire Kody worked so long to create. Plural marriage was Kody's boast. He waved his wives and children as evidence that love could grow without bounds. But with 3 of his wives lost, that dream imploded. What remains is not a plural family. It's a monogamous marriage with Robyn, shrouded in the ruins of what could have been. The other wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, began crafting lives of autonomy. They're developing businesses, spending more time with their kids, and most importantly regaining their self-respect. Each of them, in her own way, took Kody's pain of control and made it a new life of independence. For Kody, though, the break in family togetherness is a scar that excuses cannot patch up. The wives who used to bear his family have retreated, and the kids who used to esteem him now boldly question his decisions. Kody's playbook legacy does not only lie with the wives, it lives on in his kids' hearts. Through the years as they matured, many have started sharing their insights. Others have defended their mothers, detailing the isolation and rejection they themselves experienced. Others have confessed to experiencing the bite of favoritism, seeing Robyn's children gain attention as they were passed over. This ripple effect of generations is likely the most destructive aspect of the aftermath. It demonstrates that Kody's strategies didn't only damage his wives, they broke the father-child bonds. And mending that type of trauma is much more difficult than mending a marriage. At least on paper, Robyn won. She's the sole remaining wife, the one who got Kody's total devotion. But in reality, her victory comes with a cost. Robyn had been vocal about wanting sisterhood and not a husband. She said she wanted unity, not division. But unity no longer exists. The sister wives she had counted on for support are no longer there. Only the man who burned all bridges to ensure that she stayed with him. Robyn's tears over the past few seasons have revealed the hurting reality: favoritism does not create a happy home. It separates, and while she might have Kody's sole attention, it's at the expense of everything else. The strongest change in the wake is that of the audience. Viewers who used to watch to be amazed at the Brown family's peculiarity now watch to see it come apart at the seams. Social media is the platform where Kody's playbook is torn apart, mocked, and criticized. Memes feature him as the perpetual victim. Sympathy pours in for Christine, Janelle, and Meri in comments. And even die-hard fans who used to stick up for him can't help but acknowledge that his own actions caused the collapse. For a man who lived on public affirmation, this change is devastating. His place in the history of reality television is no longer the man who introduced plural marriage it's the man who lost everything because he tried to manage everything. The fallout leaves viewers with searing questions. Will Kody and Robyn's marriage last through the isolation? Can Kody ever restore his relationships with his older children? Will the other wives continue to flourish in autonomy, demonstrating to the world that their existence does not require Kody in order to be fulfilling? Some believe Kody will double down on his victimhood, continuing to present himself as misunderstood. Others think he might finally be held accountable, but only because he has no other option. Something is certain: the days of Kody masking his strategies with charm and charisma are gone. The curtain has been drawn back, and the world has witnessed the playbook for what it truly is. When history reflects on Sister Wives, it will not only be remembered as a plural marriage show, it will be remembered as a warning story about control, favoritism, and the subtle cruelty of manipulation. Kody might have believed his playbook was holding his family together, but it was actually splitting it apart. And now that legacy is etched not just in the shows of a reality television show but in the lives of the individuals who experienced it. The wives who were once defined by their relationship to him are now forging identities that demonstrate they are capable of being stronger without him. The children who were once stuck in the middle are finally speaking out. And the viewers who were once bewitched by the freshness now know the truth. And so the tale of Kody Brown leaves us with one final haunting question. Was Kody's fall a matter of bad luck, or was it the ultimate demise of a playbook founded on control, quiet, and manipulation? For because in the end, the worst twist of all is this: the same tactics he thought would secure his legacy have become the reason his legacy has fallen apart before the world's eyes.